going on, everybody? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I am back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm really excited to have Jacob on with us because Jacob just finished going through his summer 2023 recruiting process and was able to have a very successful outcome. And I think he got a couple offers. And so I wanted to get him on here to just kind of talk about his experience with you guys. And then, hopefully share some insights that you'll find helpful for yourself as well as you're going through the recruiting process. So, Jacob, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today, man. Mm-hmm. And I guess to start off, what would be helpful for our listeners is if you can maybe just do a quick introduction of who you are.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. So my name's Jacob. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I go to Tufts University in Boston, which I later found out is considered a non-target school in the investment banking recruitment process, which means, which I was told means that I have a lower chances initially of getting recruited by banks. We don't have on-campus recruiting. And so knowing that when I started recruiting, I wanted to try to figure out how I could position myself best because I became very interested in investment banking. I knew it's something that I really wanted to do. And I saw, after speaking with Sam and Wall Street Mastermind and learning about the program, I just decided that it would position me best in doing this myself. And it was definitely the right decision. I'm very happy that I was able to work with Sam, and it's a program that's ongoing. I've created a really good network within the program of some other people who did the program and are recruiting, and I'm just really happy with making that decision.
That's awesome. So I guess if you can take us back to the beginning, because you mentioned you realized that you really want to do investment banking. When did you come to that realization? Was it like, I don't know, freshman year, sophomore year? Like how early or how late did you figure that out?
Yes. So I figured out I wanted to do investment banking at the beginning of my sophomore year, right when I got on campus. At that point, all I knew about investment banking was it was considered, everyone told me it was the best finance-related analyst position you could get because of all the experience. I knew it had something to do with finance and Excel, but I didn't really understand what the job meant. I guess I became interested because other people around me were doing it. But as a result of that, I learned about it. And I'm the type of person that's very interested in how things work. And I thought that being an analyst at a bank would allow me to think about how companies make strategic decisions. Yeah. And I'm the type of person that wants to work hard, especially if I know I'm going to be better off as a result of the work. So I know investment banking as an analyst is a lot of work, but I know that people come out of it learning a lot and being very, very well positioned for if they want to stay in banking or go to something else. It just seemed like the best thing I could do for my own career based on my interests.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, you really only started working with us like January of this year. So it's like less than 4 months ago. And obviously during that time, you've just been going through the recruiting process in real time. Like as soon as you joined the program, you were kind of recruiting was already happening, right? But yes. Up until you joined our program, prior to that, what were some of the things you were already doing on your own in terms of recruiting, and I don't know what else that you were doing? What resources were you using and how did you go about it?
So before I joined the program, I was studying the guides, which everyone told me to memorize every technical question that was on there. I was networking, meaning I was sending cold emails to bankers where I was finding their emails somehow on LinkedIn or through the small alumni network at Tufts. But I wasn't doing that with much success. I didn't have much confidence in what I was doing. And honestly, I wasn't getting great results. My networking calls weren't going great. I didn't really have an idea of how to do it. And I also wasn't confident that I knew the technical part of the process. So, knowing how much I wanted to do banking, and I know that only a small percentage of people break into banking. It's many times it's not just less than 1%. It can be less than 0.5% of people. And I know that there's a short window of time to get into banking. Like there's a recruitment period where you have your best chances, like sophomore year. People can do it otherwise, but generally that's the best time to break in. So I wanted to learn more about Wall Street Mastermind to like give myself the best chance I could. I saw it as an investment in myself, as an investment in my career.
Got it. Okay. How did you find us? Because there's like there are so many things out there that you could have probably used, right? Like, how did you find us? And when you thought about when you were making this decision of joining Wall Street Mastermind, like I'm sure you shopped around and compared it to all the other options out there. So like, what made you pick us over, all the other options?
Sure. The first, I'll break this up into like two parts about how I decided to like do some type of training program like this. I was talking to a managing director at a bank, and he actually said that some of his interns for last summer prepared by doing a coaching program like Wall Street Mastermind. And that just made me start looking into programs. Sam actually does a really good job of advertising the program on LinkedIn and YouTube. So I was familiar with the name Wall Street Mastermind. And I remember reaching out to him, asking to set up a phone call to learn more about the program. We spoke on the phone. I had a chance to ask questions, and he told me about the program, the high success rate they have. And he gave me time to just think about it because it was, we only had one phone call, but he said that he gave me a lot of resources to learn about the program. And after thinking about it for a day, I felt very comfortable moving forward. And then I did, and then I started with it.
Got it. Okay. So basically it sounds like you had already seen us around, all the content we put out, and you've been following us maybe loosely for a while. And then at that point, it's just about learning more about the program, seeing if it's legitimate and if it's actually going to give you the help that you need, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
What did your parents think about it? Like, because I'm sure this was like a foreign concept to them, right? Of the idea of one, you having to look for a job so early as a sophomore, and two, the fact that you can actually like hire a coach to help you with the process. Like, was that obviously they were supportive where you wouldn't have ended up in the program, but was that like, do you have to do a lot of convincing, or was it like pretty easy conversation, or?
So the first thing I did when I brought up to my parents was just discuss why I wanted to do it. And I told them about what I've learned about investment banking, how it's like a really great way to start my career. And I just said, like, I think that right now I don't feel confident about the process, but after speaking with Sam and learning about Wall Street Mastermind, I know that this would accelerate like where I am in the process. And I know that I would get the results out of it that I wanted.
Yeah.
And they thought that they saw it as reasonable. I know that my mom looked into it herself. She's spoken with Sam on different occasions, and that's what it took. I think that investing in yourself is a great decision, especially if it means that you can start your career in a really great place. So my parents were on board after I discussed what the program was about and how I actually saw it helping me.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, which is just your mindset around this whole thing, and your parents too as well, was that you guys viewed this as an investment in yourself, right? Because that's really what it is you're investing to advance your career. For this, it's no different than like, I don't know, why do you pay so much money to go to college? That's like an investment in yourself so that you can get a better career, right? And so I feel like this kind of falls into like the same bucket. So that makes a lot of sense. Versus like, a lot of people, they might think of this as like a cost or something, which means like there's no returns associated with this decision, which is not really true, right? Because if you can improve your career trajectory or get a better job that's higher paying and more prestigious
Sure.
and better exit opportunities, the ROI on that for the rest of your career is going to be low, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And
so-
can I add one thing, if you don't
yeah,
mind?
sure.
And the last thing that I didn't doing this program, I didn't just learn about how to recruit for investment banking. It was a great way to learn about how to market myself, because I feel like in different parts of my career, I will be recruiting, I will be networking,
Yeah.
and learning how to network and actually write emails the right way when you're reaching out to people, and knowing the proper language to use is a very important skill that
Yeah.
you don't just use in recruiting, but everywhere in the professional world. And that's probably one of the biggest lasting effects I've had, besides understanding investment banking interview questions, and being able to familiarize myself with my own story so that I can tell that to interviewers. But that was one of the, I think, greatest things I learned in this program, is how do I actually network with people? How do I actually send emails and get good responses? Because there was a big difference between before I started and after I started the program in that area.
That's a great point. You're right. A lot of the stuff that you're learning in this program, sure, where it's geared towards getting into investment banking, but really, I consider them to be life skills that you're going to use no matter what you do in the future. It just so happens that investment banking is one of the toughest careers you could try to break into, and so like if it works at that level,
Mm-hmm.
it almost certainly works for anything else you try to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a really, really great point. But that's a good segue into kind of like, the next question I want to ask you, which is like, what were some of the things that you did inside of the program after you joined? So like, again, you've been in the program for less than 4 months. And I think it's been maybe about a month since you got the offer, right? So,
It's been 2 months. It's been a month and a half. So
okay.
start to end, I was in this program for almost like 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And then my whole recruiting process happened in that period of time.
Right.
And even in that short period of time, it made a huge difference in my
Because
process.
in that 2 to 2.5 months, I think you got both your sophomore summer internship taken care of and your junior summer internship taken care of, right? So I guess the question I was going to ask you is like, what were some of the things that you did after you joined the program, and for example, and like what were like the game changers for you? Because like for example, you mentioned, hey, you saw a big difference in your networking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you think caused that change? Because I think this is the part that is hard for a lot of people outside of the program to visualize. Like they think, for example, if we just take the networking example, they think like, well, I'm already networking. So then like when I go into a Wall Street Mastermind, they're just gonna tell me that I need to network and I'll still be networking. And then like, what's the difference, right? So like,
Yeah,
can you maybe shed some light on that for maybe people who
sure.
are outside looking in?
Sure. So, in terms of networking, I consider first you have to find out how to get bankers' emails, and it can take a lot of time, or using the tricks that like Sam teaches us, it can actually take not that much time, and which is really great when you're in school and you have a lot of other things on your plate. Then the other part is reaching out to them, getting them to respond. They get hundreds and thousands of emails from people like me wanting to get on a networking call with them. And so you have one chance to get their attention and capture it and turn that into them agreeing to speak on the phone with you for 10 to 15 minutes. And then once you do that, you have to get them to like you. And that doesn't just mean asking them, probably rehearse questions that you've probably heard from other people who've recruited at your school. No, there's actually a strategy to it. And there's actually like a human element to it. And once I went through the networking training that is involved in that's offered in Wall Street Mastermind, I had really great conversations with bankers. I actually learned a lot, and that is a key part to the recruiting process, because you actually use a lot of what you discuss with bankers on networking calls in your interviews. They're going to ask you, what did you talk about with this banker when you were networking? And so all of a sudden I had like 20 networking calls every week, up from 1 or 2. And
Wow.
that is why my recruiting process sped up, is because I was actually getting on the phone with analysts at banks, and I knew what to do with that conversation. I knew I had a plan to get it from one conversation to talk to someone else and eventually translate into getting interviews. And that's what matters, is you can't just talk on the phone with people and then say bye. You have to know how to navigate that so you can get to the end goal, which is potentially getting an interview and then an offer.
Yeah. Wow. So you're saying you were networking before on your own, and then you started networking using some of the strategies and tactics that we taught you, and you, I guess, 10 to 20x your call volume, which is massive. But also the conversations that you were having became more fruitful because it wasn't just like 30 minutes of burning empty calories and having it go nowhere, but it was like you actually were getting what you came for out of those conversations, which ultimately is like the thing you want is like a referral, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, so that's huge, right? Because even if we just talk about the first part, if you think about it, it's like people are always like, oh, like networking is just a numbers game. Like, sure, okay, it's a numbers game, but like if you have one at bat a week versus if you have 20 at bats a week, like how many more referrals do you think you'd be able to get, even if you didn't improve the conversation whatsoever? Like your conversation skills are just the exact same. Like, hey, you have 20 more tries to get someone to help you out. That's huge. But then the other thing is you're also getting better at having these conversations. So like, even if we didn't increase the opportunity volume, you could have had the same amount of conversations and gotten more referrals out of it, right? So there's almost like two different ways to increase your leverage. Like, yes, we're getting more at bats and we're improving your batting average. And so you're going to score way more runs, right? It's kind of like how I think about it. And I think like the other thing too, which like we're not going to spill all the secret sauce or whatever, but like I think people kind of, I don't know what your experience is, but people kind of like oversimplify what networking is about, right? Like if you go on Wall Street Oasis or online and you try to like read up on how networking works, I think like the high level summary of what people tell is like, yeah, just send some cold emails to bankers and like, you know, make sure you ask them good questions and then like hope that they refer you when the time comes. This is like, I can almost like sum it up in like 3 sentences in terms of like what people think it is versus like the way that you learned how to network inside of our program. It was so much more than that, right? There's like so much that goes into like, we're very deliberate about every single step of the process and how you optimize it. And individually, these may all seem like very small tweaks, but put together, everything kind of compounds. And to your point, like the conversion rates skyrocketed, right?
Yeah,
that's hard for people to understand, right?
Yeah, no, there was a huge difference. And you know, the other thing I'll add is that in the program, there are videos explaining the concepts, but there's also Sam and the other people who run Wall Street Mastermind are very receptive to questions. If I can reach out to them during the day or during their office hours that they hold twice a week, if I do have a question about this. So I'm not just left on my own learning through this material that they've taught us. Like there were times where I sent Sam a message and he always gets back to me very fast. If I had a concern or I wanted to ask him a question about how to network with this person, because there might be a difference in networking or talking to an analyst at a bank versus a managing director, or depending on what the, you know, it could be situational. So there are also opportunities to ask questions live, and that was also very helpful.
Yeah, I think the situational point is a good one, which is I feel like a lot of the resources that are available out there are kind of just like generic one size fits all type of advice, right? And so they don't take into it, not that they don't want to, but it's impossible for them to take into account all the different scenarios and situations that might come up when you, Jacob, are specifically going through the process, right? And so like being able to ask questions about your specific situation and what to do in each of those situations, which like the answer will be different. I think that's huge, right? So you're not like leaving anything on the table. I think that's the issue with most people is like they only have one approach because that's what they read from, I don't know, one of these generic resources, and like that's the only way they know how to do things. But in reality, it's not that straightforward, right? So that's cool. What about, so that's like on the networking side. What about on like the interview side of things? Like how, I mean, you sound like you were already reading probably like, 400 questions guide and all the other guides that people typically tell each other to read. So you were doing that before coming in. What was there a difference in how you prepared for or learn what you needed to learn for the interview side of things after coming into the program?
Yes. Before I joined the program, I thought that technicals was 90% of getting the jobs, the questions I'll ask about banking. And what I learned actually is the behavioral part of it is equally as important. And there is a way to get better at that. There is a way to get better at answering questions about yourself. They want to get to know you. And I think that's also a big area where I improved in this program, is learning how to answer questions about myself. Like, they want to know about my background. They want to know, they could ask me trick questions or this and that. And knowing how to respond, especially under pressure, is extremely important in these interviews, because you may not get many interviews and you want to make the most of the chances you get. Yeah. So studying the behavioral questions, familiarizing myself with my story and being able to articulate that to bankers who are hearing this from thousands of kids and being able to stand out and be unique is extremely important. I think that is honestly, that's where I made the most improvement. I think that's where the reason I had the most success, because I basically unlocked, through this training, how to market myself in interviews, in networking calls. And then the technical part, like when you when you look at these guides that almost everyone has access to, I think that you're not going to feel as confident going into interviews if you just memorize it. It's really important to understand the concepts underlying these questions, because if you get a question that is sort of a twist on the regular question, you understand the concept, so you can think your way through it. And Sam and Wall Street Mastermind does a great job of explaining the concept so that you know what you're actually talking about, and it takes less pressure off having to memorize 400 questions, which I know that's not something I could do. But so in those two areas, behavioral and technical, I think that also was where I grew in this program.
Right. That makes sense. I guess on that first part, on the behavioral side, because I agree. Like people always think what you thought when you came, which is like everyone thinks like the technicals is like 90% of the battle, and then behaviorals is just like this afterthought, right? In reality, the behaviors are more important because pretty much everyone's going to know their technicals. Everyone who's like qualified and is like actually a contender to get an offer, they're probably going to know most of their technicals, and that's really not where you're going to be able to like stand out, right? It's just you have to match other people, but it's really hard to be like, oh my god, Jacob is like 10 times better than the other guy at technicals. Like, I mean, you just can't. But on the behavioral side, like that's where you can have a huge variance between your story and someone else's story. And not to mention, you mentioned that your networking conversations ended up becoming a lot better. Most of your networking conversations require you to answer behavioral questions, right? Because the banker's asking you about you, your background, and what you've done, and your motivations. Like those are behavioral questions.
Yes.
If you're not able to answer those questions well while you're networking, you won't even get to the interview stage. right? And so people don't
Yes.
really think about that.
Excuse me. Excuse me. No, that's true. I think of the networking calls as an extension of the interview. The bankers are taking notes, and they're when you get on the call with them for 10 minutes, they're also thinking about, is this someone worth investing more time on our part as the bank? Is this someone who we see moving forward in the process? So when they ask you a question about you, it's really important to have something ready and have something that's prepared the right way. I'm not prepared, but knowing how to answer that the right way, so you make a good impression, and that they feel comfortable referring you to other people, because they want to look good too. They want to refer someone who they think has a chance. So you're right on that.
And I think a lot of people don't know this, but like, I think it's funny because everyone's always like, oh, I want to work for Goldman Sachs. I want to work for Goldman Sachs, right? We had a lot of clients go through Goldman Sachs interviews, and Goldman Sachs interview is like very, very behavioral. There's like barely any technicals. Some people go through like the entire super day. Like I just had a couple clients do interviews with Goldman TMT, which like on Wall Street Oasis, it gets worshipped as like the group, right? And they go through the super day with Goldman TMT, 3 rounds of 30-minute interviews, not a single technical question. They just don't care. Like they just like, they want to know who you are. Right? I'm not saying that's normal. Not every firm's like that. Most firms will ask you some technical questions, but like that just goes to show you like the importance of behaviors, right? And on the technical side, I think like, to your point, like it's more about understanding the concepts as opposed to like memorizing specific questions. And I mean, you went through, a decent number of interviews, right? Like, would you say the questions that you got asked in those interviews were like straight out of the guides, or were they like pretty different? I mean, same concepts, obviously, but I mean, like in terms of the question itself, what was it like the same or was it different?
So the three, I had interviews where I got variants of the questions off the guide, and because I read the guides and because I like listened to watch the technical prep and Wall Street Mastermind, I was prepared for them. Then I had technical questions about the specific industry I was recruiting for, which was energy, oil and gas, renewables. And Sam helped me prepare for that too. There are ways to prepare for those specific questions. And then there was a super day I had where the technical interviewer said to me, look, I'm sure you prepared with the guides. I'm going to just make up questions. And that is where I knew I was thanking myself that I understood the concepts as a result of, this program, because he asked me questions that I hadn't heard exactly. I'd never heard them before, but I was able to say, okay, like this is my thought process. And I was able to get to the answer just because I knew the concept, I understood it. So, understand the concepts, is very important. You never know what questions will come up, but it's best the whole point of this is to be as prepared as you can, because again, it's a very, not many people get these jobs, but you can give yourself a very good chance if you're prepared the right way.
I think it's really funny that you mentioned that point about your interviewer explicitly telling you that he knows you probably prepared with the guides, and he's deliberately going out of his way to ask you questions that are not in the guides, because you're not our first student that has told us that recently. I think that is a trend that we are seeing. And also, like, as you know, all of our students, like when they go through interviews, they come back and they contribute all the questions that they got into like a centralized database. So we kind of have like a real-time view of what types of questions these firms are asking, right? And even if they don't say it, we are already seeing that, yeah, most of the questions that they're asking, or the majority, are not like from these guys. Like they're asking a lot more like open-ended application type questions that like really require you to like think on your feet and be able to apply this knowledge that you either have or don't have, right? But also, like, bankers are now just like, they're not even being coy about it. They're just like, yeah, I'm going to ask you questions that are not in these guides. And the reason why they're doing that is because every single candidate that's recruiting today, they're all doing the same things. They're all memorizing the same guides. And the interviewers, they catch on too, right? Like it doesn't, do them any good to just ask every single person questions that they know everyone already memorized. Like they can't distinguish between who's actually good and who's not by doing that. So they have to adapt. And so like these interviews are getting harder and harder over time because I think as the amount of resources and information out there proliferates and as the quality of the candidates improve, just because everyone's like more ready now than they used to be, the interviewers are also going to make the interviews harder. So you have to kind of like do something different than everybody else and stay one step ahead of the curve, basically. Right. And I don't even want to imagine what they're going to be doing 5 to 10 years from now. What people are going to be expected to do at that point. But that's just kind of how things work, right? Like you think about it, it's harder for your generation to get into the top colleges now than it was for like my generation. And it was harder for my generation than it was for like your parents' generation. Like things only get more competitive over time. Right? That's just the way the world works. And like investment banking is no different. By the time you have kids, I don't know what it's going to take to get into college.
Yeah, it just the recruiting happens earlier. You're going to hear about the 8th grader with the Goldman offer in 10 years.
That is the running joke. Yes. Like, I mean, they're recruiting you guys sophomore year now. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually you got to be ready as a freshman, which is just insane. And eventually, yeah, I mean, who knows? Do they go to high schoolers? I don't know. Hopefully not, right? Hopefully
No,
not. That'd be
not.
ridiculous. Cool. So that's really helpful. I guess with all that said, like, what were the offers? Because you got a couple different offers, right? So, like, what was the outcome for you in the end, going through this recruiting process for 2.5 months or so, which is actually relatively quick. But yeah, what were the offers that you got?
So I had an offer from I was only recruiting in Houston. I had an offer from RBC and Piper Sandler, and then I had overall 6 super days. But and this is where I see like the benefit of being as prepared as possible because I was so prepared and like I performed well in these processes. And I thank the program for preparing me. I had options, which I was very, very happy about. I was able to consider, would I be happier here or here? Like, do I want to keep recruiting? And I think that if I wasn't as prepared, then I wouldn't have been in that spot. So I think in the span of 2 weeks, I had six super days, and which was a lot. It was all very concentrated in a short amount of time. And I remember Sam was there helping me through each step of those 2 weeks in the decision making, because it can get intense when you get to that point. And I remember being on the phone with him. I remember I was in the car driving to a super day and the car driving back, and Sam was on the phone giving me advice and helping me figure out like what was the best way to go about that. Yeah. So that's how my process, that's sort of like a snapshot of what happened.
Yeah. So ultimately, like, was it that you just got an offer that you were very happy with and you just decided to like take it and turn down the remaining firms that you were still waiting on? Or because some of these deadlines are like very tight and kind of floating, right? Or how did you think about that decision making process? Or like, were you able to like wait and hear back from everyone and then pick and choose? Or what was that experience like?
So the 3 criteria that I had in what I wanted was I wanted to be in Houston. I liked the idea of being at a smaller bank just because of how I learn. And so I like the idea of middle market boutique size banks. Yeah. And then I wanted to be at a bank that had a team that focused on like clean energy and renewables. As someone who's very interested in that, I want to be a part of a bank that was growing their practice in that area. And when I went through the process at Piper Sandler in Houston, and I learned a lot about the bank during that process, and it met each of those criteria. So after that, I just knew like that I wanted to go there. I didn't see, I didn't want to pass up on something that met all my criteria for potentially something else, and that's how it happened for me.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, so I think the biggest takeaway there is like really knowing what you want, right? I feel like you really knew like, hey, these are the things that are important to me, because ultimately, like every firm has their pros and cons and trade-offs that come with each, some combination of some combination of like compensation, prestige, exit opportunities, culture, role and responsibility, how you get along with the people there. Like there's so many factors, right? Location, right? And so it's very, very rare that you're going to find something that checks every single one of those boxes. So you kind of have to like be able to prioritize like, hey, these are the most important things to me, and kind of like pick and choose that way, right? So I think you went about it in a very mature way, which is good. So I guess okay, last question for you. Um, is there one piece of advice that you want to pass on to other people that are maybe going through the process now? Like maybe something that someone told you along the way that really helped you tremendously, um, or something that was like just kind of made a big difference for you, or whatever you want to share with people, like something just to kind of help our listeners out.
Let me think about that.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I received was to work hard. A lot of us recruiting are in college, and that means that we're balancing our schoolwork, and we want to maintain, some semblance of a social life. But ultimately, when you start this recruiting process, there's a lot of material to learn in order to be prepared. So if you watch, instead of watching Netflix for 30 minutes at night, study your technicals. Over winter break, start studying your technicals. Be proactive about getting on recruiting calls and be organized. The networking calls take up a lot of time. Like it can add up, especially when you have classes and you have other obligations. You might be in clubs, you might be commuting, you might have a job, and it takes a lot of work. But again, it pays off if you put in that work.
Yeah.
And we were joking earlier that the recruiting process happens earlier, but after having committed to a bank, now I have all this time where I can focus on college. I have a lot more time now, but I did a lot of work this year in order to get to that place. So the advice I'd give is work hard. If this is something you want to do, then for me it was a great, it paid off. And I think that working hard can give you opportunities. And I think that's a big piece of advice I would want to give. And I'll try to think if there's anything else, but that's I think that's a big one.
No, I mean that probably is the biggest thing, right? I think that at least I find after having worked with hundreds of students on the recruiting process, it's like it's often not the people that are the smartest, or even like go to the best schools, or maybe have the best grades or whatever that get into banking. Like, sure, those things obviously play a part, and I'm not saying they're non-factors, but I think a lot of times it's actually like the people that are getting offers are just the people that work the hardest, are willing to like make the most sacrifices in terms of, to your point, like, like sacrificing their social life or watching Netflix or whatever other things that you have that you like wasting time with. But like the people that are willing to just buckle down and grind it out, that's kind of what banks are looking for. They're looking for people that can do that, right? Like what do you think is going to happen when you are on the job and you have 80, 90, 100 hours of work weeks, and you're not going, they want people that are willing to, set their own agenda aside and be willing to just like give everything to their work. And so I think that is like, I don't know if it's by design for these firms, but like maybe inadvertently, by pulling forward the recruiting timeline earlier and earlier every year, they're almost like filtering out the people that wouldn't necessarily be cut out for banking anyway. Because because you have so much on your plate that you have to get done in such a short amount of time.
Yes. And that's true, is, working hard is an extremely important part of the job. And if there's time, there's like one more thing I thought of that's really important.
Yeah.
Another piece of advice is it's really important to surround yourself with people who are also working towards this, so you don't feel like you're an island doing all this work by yourself and potentially sacrificing maybe your social life or other things.
Yeah.
And that's what Wall Street Mastermind creates, is actually you're not just by yourself in this program. You're in a group chat and your own calls with other students around the country and around the world also recruiting for investment banking. And it made me feel a lot better about being able to talk to them sometimes and develop relationships with them, which I still talk to people I met in the program, and I probably will continue to develop relationships with them throughout my career. But it makes it easier when you see that other people are working really hard at the same thing. And I never felt like I was even competing with them. We all shared information to help each other out. And that was really important to me. So if you're at a school where not many people are recruiting, maybe find someone at your school or another school who's recruiting and talk about it, joke how you're staying up late to study your technicals. Maybe it's 1 a.m. But I think that's also something that helped me a lot, is being around people who were recruiting.
That's a great point. Because recruiting can be very lonely. Absolutely. And I think that in most places, recruiting, like you said, can be a very cutthroat thing where people aren't really inclined to help you that much because they're going for the same jobs and there aren't that many jobs out there. So people feel like, hey, if you get this piece of the pie, then that's one less job for me, right? But I think in Wall Street Mastermind, like, for whatever reason, there's actually, I know what the reason is. People don't have this scarcity mindset in our program because most people in the program expect that they're going to get a job anyway. So I feel like people don't mind helping each other. This is why, like I said, people contribute all of their interview questions in a centralized database so other people can see what questions they have. People share like higher view questions, so other people that haven't taken the higher views yet can prepare ahead of time. People share intel on like the recruiting timelines and where different firms are in the processes. And this is all like really useful information. And it's a huge competitive advantage, right? But also, more importantly, I think, yes, like you guys are all here to get jobs, but to your point, like you're actually developing relationships with these people. And in the long run, like what Wall Street Mastermind is going to become, or is already becoming, is we have a huge network of really successful young professionals who all started their careers on Wall Street at some of the top firms that are out there, right? Mm-hmm. And that becomes your network that you can tap into for future job opportunities, for who knows, like other investment opportunities. Like people literally pay multiple six figures to go to business school, not so they can like take some classes from professors. Like people primarily go to business school because they want to meet a network of people that all went to Harvard Business School, that all went to Stanford, that all went, and because those people in the future probably going to be very successful. And then, the saying, like your network is your net worth. Like this is kind of just a different form of that, right? Like, yeah, this is not a business school, but a lot of the people that you're meeting in Wall Street Mastermind are going to be really, really successful in the future. And these are probably people that you would have never met otherwise because they don't go to your school and you guys wouldn't have crossed paths, but now you know each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing, right? So I'm really glad you brought up that point. I think it's a great point. Like surround yourself with the right people, put yourself in the right environment, and just through osmosis, like I think you start to have different beliefs. You start to see like, I see so many non-target school kids coming into the program thinking like, oh, like they've been told the whole time, whether it's by people on Wall Street Oasis or wherever, it's like, oh, you have no chance because of XYZ reason, because you don't go to the right school, you don't have high enough GPA, whatever. And they come into this program and they see like, wait, but that guy goes to a non-target school also, he just got a job. And that guy just goes to a school that's even worse than mine, he just got a job. And all of a sudden you start believing because you're seeing like you're seeing these examples of people that are doing what you're trying to do versus like, I mean, look, I'm not saying that other people who tell you you can't do this, you can't do that are being like malicious about it. I don't think that they're lying to you. I just think that that's their view of the world because through their lens, they don't know anyone who has been able to do that before. So they're just telling you their truth, but their truth isn't necessarily true just because they don't know anyone like that. So maybe they're not hanging out in the right places. Right. So I think, like, to your point, surrounding yourself with the right people, putting yourself in the right environment can be a huge game changer, even in ways that most people won't even think about. Right? But that's really that's a really good that's really good advice. So thanks for sharing that. And I guess on that note, like, guys, if you're still listening to this and you're going through the recruiting process right now and you feel like you need help with a lot of these things that we talked about, whether it's like building up your resume or just getting way better conversion rates on your networking efforts, or just preparing for the interviews, whether it's behaviors or technicals. If you want help with these things, and you're the type of person who's willing to work hard, but you want to see more results for the amount of hard work that you're putting in, then reach out to us. Schedule a call with our team. We can't work with everybody. You do have to apply, so it's by application only. But the way you do that is by scheduling a call with our team. We'll hop on with you, talk about what your current situation is, what are some of your goals, what are the challenges that you have that you feel like are currently preventing you from getting there, and if based on what you tell us, we feel like we're confident we can help you, then we'll walk you through what we think that will look like. And even if we don't think we're a good fit to help you, because again, we can't work with everybody, then we'll just give you some advice instead on what we think we would do if we were you. Right. So we will either way you're going to walk away with something that helps you either way. So if you're interested in doing that, you can book this call with us at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you. Okay. With that said, Jacob, I want to thank you for taking so much time out of your day to talk to us. And, you're really great to work with. And it was awesome just seeing how hard you worked and then seeing that pay off and seeing you get an offer that you're really, really happy about that checks all the boxes for you. So congratulations again. And, I look forward to seeing what you accomplish both during your summer internship and really be, far beyond that. So
thanks, Sam.
Yeah. If there's anything else that we can ever help you with, don't be a stranger,
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time. All right.